Good afternoon, everyone. This is the second lecture, the lecture about, it's my mask, that's fine. Lecture about the importance of landscapes and nature in Romantic era poetry. Um, as you see here, the late 18th and 19th century developed a, a sensitivity to nature. And the writer who was most associated with this was Wordsworth. And there's an article in Wordsworth that I want you to look at. Um, they weren't just writing about the poets of this era weren't just writing about paintings. They were writing about experiences in nature. It was very experiential. Side for a second, the famous poem by Wordsworth, the "I wandered lonely as a cloud," ends with the last stanza saying, "For oft when on my couch I lie, in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And then my heart with pleasure fills, and dances with the daffodils." It's this concept of the inward eye that the Romantic era poets were focused on. This idea that you could find your inward soul, this kind of peace by experiencing nature. And that experience is what they were writing about. We have Keats here, to Autumn. We'll talk a bit about Keats. He was a Romantic era poet who knew he was going to die young. And in his 30, I think he was 35 when he died, he wrote a volume of, of exquisite poetry. So here you see who you'll read this on your own, but lines like this: "Who hath not right? Who hath not seen thee often amid my store? Sometimes whoever seeks abroad may find thee sitting careless on a greenery floor, thy hair soft lined with the winnowing wind." This is to autumn. Most people are writing about spring and summer. This is how Keats describes autumn, right? The search for self in nature. Personifying autumn. "Where are the songs of spring? Ay, where are they? Think not of them. Thou hast thy music too, while barred clouds bloom the soft dying day, and touch the subtle plains with a rosy hue." This kind of idea that as humans we live our lives from birth to death, that autumn, that kind of middle age, that's part of life. And that part of life is just as important and just as beautiful as spring is, because all poets write about spring, right? So kind of finding yourself there. And then, of course, we have this one here. Oh, hold on a second. I'm going to find this on the smartboard and play that in the background. Talk about a bit about this. Poetry.
For today, the title is normally abbreviated to the Tintin Abbey Ode.
So just playing this in the background.
And he recalls at age 28 when he wrote this poem, his being there in the past, and it reflects on his relationship with his past and with his sister and with the natural world, and contains, for me, one of the most profound expressions of connectivity with nature and with a spiritual realm in and through nature. So here is the Tintin Abbey Ode. 5 years have passed, 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters, And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a sweet inland murmur. Once again do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs, which on a wild secluded scene impress thoughts of a more deep seclusion, and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky.
I'm going to stop it there.
The day is come when I again repose.
I'm just going to mute it. So even just the beginning, I'm going to look at we're going to look at the opening. If you're going to look at the rest of the poem on your own. One thing I always say is that this shows up in textbooks all the time, and it really shouldn't be. You're far too young to look back. I mean, you might hear, yes, he was 28 when he was writing this poem and kind of reflecting on a place that he went as a youth. But, 28 in the 1800s and the 1700s was you were old then. Uh, so when he says here, thinking back to the first lines that I read, this turning of an inward eye, thoughts of more deep seclusion, and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky, right? It's a more deep connection. He's not just remembering his childhood; he's remembering the spirit of this childhood and the soul that he had when he was a child. This deep seclusion, and there's a lot of that in here, right? Looking down until breath until the breath of this corporeal frame. Here he is 28. He's already thinking about where about death. Until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended, we are laid asleep in body and become a living soul. Using nature and reconnecting nature to bring life to your soul. While an eye made quiet by the power of harmony, this inward eye from the Daffodils poem, and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. We see our souls, right? He's thinking about we see our souls in every piece of nature that we look at, every piece of nature that we hear, every piece of nature that we smell. Even if this be but a vain belief, oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of a joyless night, when the fretful stir, unprofitable, and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit I have turned to thee, O sylvan way, the wanderer through the woods. This theme of returning once again to this this state of innocence through your connection with nature. This is an important idea in Romantic era poetry. The human connection to nature.